are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen of the day. We are free and available on every platform. Today is our weekly conversation with our friend Lily Zhao from Fox 6 in Milwaukee. She was in the press box on Sunday, and so we're going to ask her about those Milwaukee fans. We're going to ask her. I had some friends from Milwaukee who were there. I personally have never noticed a difference between Milwaukee fans and Green Bay fans, but you know who has takes about it? Green Bay fans. The green package season ticket holders love to drag the Milwaukee fans. They just love it. I don't know why, but this is a thing, and it's a thing that players notice too, by the way. And the coaches notice, and Matt LaFleur even made reference to it in his conversation last week. So I'm gonna ask her about that. But before we do that, I want to talk about a player that I think a lot of people were really excited to see this season. A.J. Dillon showed the entire repertoire on Sunday. And I think it is worth pointing out that when you look at the touches, not just the rushes, but the touches, the rushes were even. Both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon had 15 carries. A.J. Dillon had 15 carries for 81 yards. Aaron Jones had 15 carries for 48 yards. And they also produced in the passing game. A.J. Dillon caught the little swing route that he broke a tackle and turned into a 16-yard gain. Aaron Jones had 3 catches for 51 yards, including that awesome little, it's like a play on mesh. It's a clear out concept where the 2 inside receivers go straight up the field, and the receiver on the far end of the trips runs a little underneath route. It can be used against man or zone and creates all kinds of problems for defenses, and it gets someone like Aaron Jones the ball with a chance to make a play in space. I'd love to see them run that for A.J. Dillon as well, because A.J. Dillon running through a secondary is a scary sight if you're a defense. We saw a little bit of the 21 of the pony personnel with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. That was supposed to be something that was a huge part of this offense, and it just hasn't been so far this season. They ran pony personnel, 21 personnel with 2 running backs on the field, 14% of offensive snaps last season. And it's more like 5% this season. It's just not happening. And I don't know why. And it's not a criticism necessarily, because the offense over the last 3 weeks, Aaron Rodgers leads the league in EPA per play. He's top 5 and or leads the league in the composite score, top 5 in EPA per play, top 5 in completion percentage above expectation. I mean, he's playing really, really well the last 3 weeks, and the offense has been really good the last 3 weeks. There's some pockets of inconsistency. They're playing differently. They're not using play action as often. This is something I wrote about for The Leap today, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. They're using play action about 8% less. It was almost 30% of dropbacks last year were play action passes for Aaron Rodgers. And it is, I guess it's 7%. It's 22.8% of his dropbacks this year, which is still more than Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, guys who are running some similar type offenses. But it's still not as much as we're used to seeing. And that is presumably because of the offensive line and not wanting to turn your back to the defense and all that stuff. What we saw in this game, though, I think is the evolution for the coaches to see, okay, this is what A.J. Dillon can do. Because we saw him on 3rd and short pick up key first downs. We saw him on 1st down, swing route, pick up, like I said, 16 yards. And then there was that motion Amari Rodgers comes across the formation, inside zone give to A.J. Dillon, and he hits a chunk run, 25 yards, nearly scores. So you can't just say, well, he's this big, thundering, plodding back. He's not that. He can put his foot in the ground, get downhill, and create for you. He is showing more confidence reading blocks at the line of scrimmage. He is showing more confidence in his own ability to make plays with the ball in his hands as a receiver. And in space, he is a load. He is an absolute unit, this guy at 6'1", 250, who runs a 4.5 or just under 40. Takes him a little while to get going, but he can put his foot in the ground and really motor. I mean, he's like a semi going downhill. And when he gets in the open field, he is tough to deal with. The problem is you don't want to take Aaron Jones off the field because he's so effective. They only ran that little RPO concept where you have A.J. Dillon and then you have Aaron Jones in that flare motion. They only ran that, I think, 2 times, maybe 3 times. I would like to see them on the field together more often. And maybe that's something that they'll get to. I don't presume to know better than Matt LaFleur how to scheme up this offense. This offense was the best schemed offense in the league last year. They're once again, really rolling over the last couple of weeks, and I think they can get even better. I think fans want to see A.J. Dillon more. I am acknowledging it is difficult to do that because in order to play A.J. Dillon, you have to take Aaron Jones off the field at least sometimes. And for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm showing the graphic with their numbers right now. A.J. Dillon averaging over 4.5 yards per carry so far this season. Aaron Jones under 4 yards per carry. Now Jones is continuing to be a factor in the passing game and not just swing screen. That's what mostly they're doing with A.J. Dillon right now. The only part that he's really playing is either as a decoy out wide or he's, it's dump off, it's swing pass, it's screen game. And I don't even know that we've seen him run a screen so far this season. Aaron Jones, as a receiver, can do so much more for you. But as a runner, A.J. Dillon has been more productive this season. Now, let me be unequivocal about this. I do not think Aaron Jones is an inferior player to A.J. Dillon, but I think Dillon has earned some more opportunities, especially to run the ball. And I'd like to see what he can do a little bit more in the passing game. So this is a difficult thing. And Mike Wall called it, I love this yesterday. Mike Wall called it first world problems. They have to figure out a balance between 2 running backs who look like they're both potentially very good players. And Aaron Jones is still the clear number 1 and is going to continue to still be the clear number 1. One of the reasons why Matt LaFleur mentioned that they haven't hit any home runs yet, one of the reasons why they haven't is because of how teams are playing them. It's going to be a lot of too high safeties, and you're just not going to hit home runs against too high. Now, you make one guy miss, someone slips. I mean, there are opportunities there, I guess. But Aaron Jones, he is someone who can take a 1-yard gain and turn it into 6. He's someone who can take a 10-yard gain and turn it into 50. We saw A.J. Dillon. That was a nice size hole. He hit it with force because that's what he's capable of doing with his explosiveness. And he creates a chunk run. The Packers are capable of doing that. And it was something that they were really good at last year. This rushing offense has just not been as good this season as we're used to seeing it, despite the fact that they're seeing all of these light boxes. And that is a little surprising. I mean, they're 16th in rush offense DVOA this season. Last year, they were 5th. Now, overall, they're not as good. And part of that is what's going on with week 1. But also, I mean, Green Bay, they were 4th in 2019 when the offense wasn't nearly as good. Part of that is the offensive line issues. If they've got David Bakhtiari and Allen Jenkins healthy, maybe this is a moot point because they're opening up holes at the rate they normally do. Royce Newman has not been great in the run game so far this season, unless it's he and Josh Myers getting doubles on someone. He's not a body mover right now. He needs to get a little stronger. He's got really good feet and pass protection, but he needs to get a little bit stronger. And I think that's part of the deal here. It's part of why A.J. Dillon, frankly, I think has been a little bit more productive because he's going to run with that power where he can push the pile for 2 or 3 extra yards. he is a walking 5-yard gain. That is the beauty of AJ Dillon. He's going to get you 4. There's not going to be negative runs where he's dancing and trying to get to the edge. No, he's one cut and downhill. Worst case scenario, he's getting you 3 yards. Best case scenario, he's ripping off a chunk run like he did. He's not going to rip off 50, 60 yarders like you might get from Aaron Jones. Probably. I mean, every once in a while he will. He had a 40-yarder against the Titans. A guy still had to dive at his feet, but that's going to happen. DBs are going to make business decisions against AJ Dillon. That is part of the beauty of what his game is and what he can do when he's in the secondary for you. So it's a part of the game that we haven't seen much of yet that I think can become a bigger part of the offense. I don't even want to use the word should. I don't generally like to use that word because I think it presumes a lot and presumes a lot of knowledge that I don't think I have. But it is certainly something that we could see more of. And I also think that, we talk about Randall Cobb and ways to get him involved, Amari Rodgers, ways to get him involved. I'd like to see Cobb and Rodgers in on those RPO screens that they use out wide, that they used a bunch of. I mean, the Packers are just, America's guest, Jason Hirschhorn. He referred to it as spamming RPOs, just RPO. And a lot of that is in the screen game. Whether it's a give or it's a screen out to the side based on numbers. Why not get those guys opportunities to make plays with the ball in their hands? Why not do it with Aaron Jones out there and give him more opportunities with AJ Dillon in the backfield? I just think there are a lot of interesting ways that they can push this offense forward. They're still seeing what AJ Dillon can do in a more full-time role. They're still seeing what Randall Cobb can do, what Amari Rodgers can do, and what are the limits that they can push with this offensive line. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth a little bit here because AJ Dillon has been playing very well, I think. Obviously, Randall Cobb has become an important part of this offense, and Sunday showed what he can do for this team, even without a deep threat, which was one of the big issues for this team in 2015 when they struggled so mightily. Without Jordy, teams just were like, we don't think you can beat us. Luckily, this, Devontae Adams has evolved, and Aaron Rodgers has seen more of that stuff. Plus, Matt LaFleur, I think, is a superior schemer and play designer to Mike McCarthy. I mean, I don't think that's even a question at this point. And so they have some better answers now. I think they're going to have, by the end of the season, even more answers because they can integrate these players. This is something that this LaFleur staff has shown the ability to do. And that is when there's new players, they're going to find some things that they can do well and maximize them. But the more they learn about what players are good at and what they can and can't do, they're going to find ways to put them in a position to succeed. All right, Packer fans, listen up. I have an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Why would you do that? Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app and use the promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. And then you can cash out anytime. Bank account, PayPal, e-gift card, Amazon, other brands. Just download the Get Upside app for free with the promo code TOUCHDOWN to get that extra 25 cents per gallon on those fill-ups. All right, we made it 3 in a row after a Week 4 27-17 win for the Green Bay Packers. We are back for another edition of everyone's favorite game. Zhao, you doing? Lily Zhao here from Fox 6 in Milwaukee. Lily, you were in the building on Sunday. So now that we're here, Zhao, you doing?
Peter, thanks for having me yet again. It was fun to be back. I think I tweeted out it was my first regular season game back at Lambeau since 2019, which is crazy to say. But it was good to be back. Packers are looking good so far. I'm feeling good. I hope you are too. So, how you doing?
I am good. Before we get to the actual game, this was a big topic of conversation this last week, the Milwaukee crowd. And now that you are quite literally part of the Milwaukee crowd, physically and metaphorically in this case, you've been to these games. It's been a little while for you, but because of 2020, there was no fans. But is there a difference? Can you tell from the press box about these differences between the Green Bay fans and Milwaukee fans?
I will say that they kind of all meld together. I would love to say there's like a distinct difference, but not really. I knew there was going to be a bunch of, Milwaukee fans there. The traffic was, insane, but
worse than normal.
Yeah, normal, but not really a difference though, Peter. They're kind of all the same. They're just big Wisconsin fans. We'll just put it that way.
I only ask because it was something that Matt LaFleur made reference to, and players have made reference to it in the past. People who have been around a long time, they think they notice a difference. It is certainly something that fans claim to notice. I, as someone who have been to both, I have never really noticed that much of a difference. Apparently, there is a sit down more vibe from Milwaukee fans. I don't know why that would be. I had a bunch of friends that were there and they said the crowd was great. It was a great time. So as long as people are having fun, I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, and that's what you want, right? Especially after last year. You want everyone having fun. You want them, bringing the energy. I know a couple players talked about it after the game about how, special that energy was again. So it's good to have everybody from Wisconsin in one huge stadium, and it was fun.
Yeah. One huge, enormous place where we can all congregate. So this game, I think now that we have some distance from it, it is hard now to separate what we saw from what we're going to see, knowing that Jaire Alexander is probably going to miss some time. So when you think about this defensive performance, how much of that is colored by, okay, well, that's nice that's what they look like then, but we sort of have no idea what it's going to look like moving forward, and no idea, at least as we record this, when Zhao is going to be back on the field.
Yeah, that's going to be a big blow to that secondary, considering what the severity is of that AC joint injury in his shoulder. I feel like, it's something we have to keep an eye on because, it's not like saying the guys behind him, the Yadam and Shmar Jean-Charles, those guys can't really pick up the load, but you're talking about potentially replacing a Pro Bowl cornerback in Jaire. And we know he's so good. He affects the defense in so many ways and opposing offenses. And when you look at what Cincinnati has, I feel like if he's not playing, which don't think there's a good chance that obviously he is, are they going to attack that spot? Is that where the weakness is going to be now in the secondary without Jaire present? So it's a huge loss, and hopefully it's not for an extended amount of time. We were talking about just the amount of Pro Bowlers that are not playing at the moment for this team. They have overcome a lot in their first quarter of the season, but it's as they get into tougher opponents, how are those losses going to affect this team? And we'll see, I guess, without his presence on Sunday, and give the fact that it's going to.
I mentioned this on Twitter that I think the Packers have 6 no doubt blue chip players. And right now, they are missing 4 of them. And Elton Jenkins could be back this week. We'll see. But I said it was Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Elton Jenkins, David Bakhtiari, Za'Darius Smith, and Jaire Alexander. Now, you can argue Kenny Clark belongs in that mix, especially this season. He's been playing great. You could argue Aaron Jones. Let's just set that aside for the moment. Of those 6, we know Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, and so I think he probably doesn't even get to count in this conversation. Which of these guys do they need back the most to be, to be their best? Like, which guy is the most important of that group, do you think?
Ooh, that's a good question. Of the guys that are injured, I would say, as important as Elton is, I do feel like it's Jaire.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the ability of the pressure up front. Devondre Campbell's playing a lot better. Kenny Clark is doing his job. Preston Smith injured for a little bit in that game, but he got back as well. So as much as Z is obviously missed with his leadership as well, I do think it's still Jaire. It's encouraging to see what these rookies on the offensive line have been able to do. And granted, Aaron Rodgers will still get the ball out relatively quickly, but after beating the Niners and now the Steelers without Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins, it's okay. This is an encouraging sign that these guys can be okay on the offensive line, but we have not seen this team play a whole game without Jaire Alexander. And it's, our opposing offense is going to be attacking that spot. Is that going to be the weakness, like I just talked about? So I do feel like in that group, though, Jaire probably is the guy that you want to have back ASAP.
Yeah, that is my answer as well, though I do think, especially given the way that he's playing this year, Kenny Clark, who I just said was not really officially on that list, they just don't have anybody else. Like, I think from a secondary standpoint, they can manage the 2 deep safeties. We know how good Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos are. Eric Stokes has been playing some really good ball, and they have assuming he can go this week, and we don't know what his status is, Kevin King, for all of the crap he gets from Packer fans, he's at least someone that has experience on this team and with these guys, knows this defense well enough that you feel like, okay, he knows where to be. If Kenny Clark is hurt, they don't have anyone even close. Like they almost don't have starting caliber players to put in there. So I think that is in the mix there too. I guess the question that we have to ask is, does this have to become a thing now where if Zhao's going to miss 2, 3, 4 weeks, we know Za'Darius is going to be out a while. We don't know what the situation is with the offensive line. Can Devontae Adams, can Aaron Jones, can Aaron Rodgers, can that group be good enough to carry this team, which is what they've had to do for years now?
Yeah. I mean, they're going to have to, right? I mean, that's going to have to be the way that they win football games. And, as much as we like those deep strikes from Rodgers to MVS, who, still on short-term IR, it's maybe the key is now the offense just have long sustained drives, score 3, 7 points, whatever, but keep your offense on the field so it limits the time that the defense is out there. And maybe that's just what they're going to have to do moving forward. And we saw, against the Steelers, their game plan, take Devontae out, but all right, take Devontae out, Randall Cobb and the running backs have a big game. So it's, there's still ways that they can affect games and, score points and carry this team without, maybe a Devontae Adams having a breakout game like we know he can. So you're right, though. I mean, with all the big injuries on the defensive side of the football, it's going to be the offense's job once again to get things done and hopefully build a sustainable lead that, in the fourth quarter, you're like, okay, well, we're feeling pretty good. It's not going to be a complete meltdown. So, yeah, it's going to be on Aaron Rodgers' shoulders once again.
Yeah, not a position he is unfamiliar with, to be sure. I was watching this game on Sunday, and after rewatching, I'm going, man, A.J. Dillon, he's really got to be out there. And they both he and Aaron Jones had 15 carries, but Dillon was 15 for 81, had that 25-yarder that was nearly a touchdown. He's been really good so far this season. And I go, man, they need him out there more. And then Aaron Jones is just such an invaluable part of this offense. He had 18 touches, almost 100 total yards. I don't know how you take him off the field. So how do you balance that? I mean, let's start with the simple question. Do you think A.J. Dillon should be playing more?
I think so, because, he's earned his snaps, and it's encouraging to see in those third and short situations, they're not just going to go throw the football. They're going to give it to A.J. Dillon and expect him to get a first down. I think we saw that in the Steelers game. It was third and short yardage that they were putting him in there, and rightfully so. But it's a delicate balance, right? You have two guys who are team players. They want to get out there and get their own snaps, but it's how do you really balance that? I feel like with, Aaron Jones, maybe have him in the earlier downs, and then you bring in A.J. Dillon to clean things up. But you could kind of see in that game that Matt LaFleur was drawing up drives for A.J. Dillon. It's very encouraging with what he's been able to do. I think he's still due for a big breakout game. But this is a good problem to have, right? It's a good problem to have this Thunder and Lightning duo and be like, oh, we got to get them both on the field. So yeah, I do believe he deserves more snaps, but you still got to love what Aaron Jones does. I think there was one play where you're watching Jones just so patient, right? Waiting for those gaps to open up, and he's so fun to watch, and he's really lethal in the passing game. Yeah, I mean, give them both carries. Put them on the field at the same time.
Well, and that is something that I was looking at, and we talked about it to open the show, that they played two running backs a lot more last year than they have so far this season. And maybe that is something that they need to do a little bit more moving forward. I'm going to spring this on you a little bit because I think it's an interesting question. What percentage, and maybe you know the answer, what percentage of snaps do you think Randall Cobb played on Sunday?
Oh, percentage of snaps. Ooh, that's a good question. Ooh, 70?
46%. He was not even out there half the time. And yet, this is, I'm glad you said that, because it seemed like that to me too, watching it live. Like, oh man, he's out there a lot. He's making plays, because every time he was out there, he had a big play. And he converted every pass he caught, converted for a first down. He scored twice. But he still is not even at 50% of snaps. And I just think that is very interesting. He's been so productive. And I wonder, the snaps have gone up pretty steadily. 18% in week 2, 33% in week 3, 46% in week 4, maybe week 5. He's going to break that 50% threshold. He was leading the league in yards per route run at one point. I don't think I need to ask the question, does he need to play more? Because everyone seems to agree the answer to that is yes, including and especially Aaron Rodgers. But do you think there are more ways that he can help this team?
Yeah, I mean, use him as a decoy, use him as, in the jet sweep, use him in that kind of way, right? Because even though Allen Lazard hasn't had big games, he's still on the field a lot, and the reason is his blocking.
Right.
Can they utilize it in that way? But I feel like they saw that mismatch in the slot against the Steelers. So Rodgers was like, "We're taking advantage." Cobb's the guy, especially on third down, right? He was huge there, and that's really been the key for this team in extending those drives. But I feel like just getting him on the field, and now considering, I'm sure opposing teams are like, oh, it's still the same old Randall Cobb. Not that he wasn't before, but, maybe he becomes a decoy in that sense. And then, that allows other guys to open up and get their touches as well. So I do believe that as the season moves on, we're going to see Randall Cobb with perhaps 50% or higher moving forward. But I'm shocked. I didn't think it was going to be 40. What was it, 42?
What did I say? 46%.
46. Sorry. Yeah.
So not even half. And it definitely did not seem like that, because it did seem like every time he was out there, he was either open or he got the pass. And then, of course, the one play he didn't make is the play that would have sealed the game when he reached up for Devontae Adams' ball. That's neither here nor there. If they complete that pass, the game is over. And I think people feel differently about it. This is always something that I'm trying to watch for. Fans, media, I personally felt like the Packers probably should have won this game by like 20. Did you get a vibe after the game? So this is our weekly vibes check, that the players or coaches, in this case, Matt LaFleur, who we heard from after the game, also felt that way? Like, because players tend to take a different viewpoint. They're just sort of like, look, every week is hard and winning is great. Fans and media, we tend to look at it a little bit differently. Did you get that sort of like, yeah, it was fine, but like, we probably should have kicked their ass kind of vibe?
I would say I kind of did. I feel like in the media sense, that's probably what we all were thinking, because we looked right at the entirety of the first half. Yeah. When you looked at the first half, you're like, how are they only up by a touchdown? How are they only up by 7? They should be up by at least 14 or whatever. So there was a sense in my brain where I'm like, this is weird that the game is this close on the scoreboard. I could still get the sense that, these guys are happy. They're like, winning this league is hard. You're going to take a win no matter what the point total is, but you do get a sense that these guys are like, we probably should have put up at like 35, 40 plus points, right? And they could have. I know Rodgers missed a couple guys that would have been touchdowns, but it's, I guess, again, another good problem to have, right? You're like, well, we won, it was a good win, but we could have a lot more. So I think this team is still building up to have that game where you're like, man, everything's just clicking and they're putting up a barrage of points.
I find it interesting that fans, at the end of games, in this second last possession, I think it was, the Packers had a couple runs and AJ Dillon is running it nicely and they go play action and Rodgers misses Tunyon. They have the next play, which is the Cobb play that I referenced, and they have to punt it away. And I think the Steelers scored after that to make it a little bit closer. Did you have a problem with the way that they handled that game, that series of events?
Yeah, it's. I felt like they were trying to do a little bit too much, and it's kind of like, what's working for you, right? But there was just miscommunication down there, and that's why they had to punt. It was a little questionable, but I feel like if this had been a closer game where this was a deciding drive, then I would say, yeah, that was not the best. But I feel like the game was in hand; they were fine. Obviously they would have put it away with that score, but I think it's a bigger, I guess, black hole or whatever, if the game had been not in hand at that point.
Right. If it's a 7-point game, it's a bigger deal that they do that, and certainly a bigger deal that Rodgers misses that throw. Because if he hits Tunyon, we're not even having this conversation. It's a touchdown. It's a blowout, and probably I don't even ask you the question like, should this have been as close as it was? This is one of those like 10-point games that really felt like a 20-point game for the Packers. But you're going, okay, but make it a 20-point game. Like that's what you want to see. So as we finish up here and point toward the Bengals, I have a really hard time figuring out if the Bengals are good, because they beat a Pittsburgh team that I don't think is very good. They beat a Bears team that I don't think is very good. And they, I'm looking at them going, You're 3-1, you lead the division, but like, where are the good wins? Sorry, they beat the Vikings, they lost to the Bears. I got that backwards. But they beaten the Steelers, the Jaguars, and the Vikings in a game that the Vikings absolutely should not have lost. Absolutely should not have lost. So let me ask you, do you think the Bengals are good?
I don't think they're as good as a lot of people would say, just based off their record. I think they're still let me just put it this way. They're still a good team, but they're not as good as I thought that they were going to be. But again, it's still early in the season, still growing pains for this team. But yeah, when you're talking about the wins and losses and the teams that they've beaten, it's not really quality opponents. So you got to believe that, like, while they're still a good team, they have a good quarterback, they have young talent. They're not as lethal as I feel like some people think they are. But again, though, this is going to be a good test for this Packers team because Joe Burrow can throw the football. They got offensive weapons. They can score points. The Packers are a better team. They should win this game on the road. It's going to be tough again in a hostile environment. But overall, Packers, in my opinion, much better team. Bengals coming along, but I feel like if they can get, right the ship, they could be a good team down the road.
If you were Joe Barry, last one here, how would you set up? Let's say everyone except Zhao is healthy this week. How would you set up the secondary?
Ooh, that's a good question. Without Zhao, you're hoping Kevin King's back, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. So let's assume King is healthy enough to play.
Yeah, I would say obviously you have to have Kevin out there, and hopefully he's able to make a difference. It's, do you start Isaac or Shamar? And, maybe Isaac, he's, got more snaps under him. Those guys, again, hopefully Darnell is not terribly injured. I know he went down a little bit, but I would say, you have to keep an eye on just how those cornerbacks do. That's going to be, I feel like, where Joe Burrow is going to pick at, and rightfully so, right? I think Kevin King, bold prediction, if he comes back, has a good game. And I'm only saying that because without Zhao, he's got to take the onus, right? And along with Eric Stokes as well. Those guys have to take the onus and say, we're gonna help the secondary. We're gonna be a lot better because our Pro Bowl leader is not on the field. So I think those two maybe have a good game.
A little chip on his shoulder game from Kevin King. I like it. You predicted a pick six last week, which did not happen, but we did get 2 turnovers from this Packers defense, including an interception from Eric Stokes. So I feel like that's at least half a win.
It is.
If we're doing like the fact check thing, like that's one of those. It's at least half true. Like this, you got the spirit of it, I think.
Yeah, they scored touchdowns, just not on the defensive side of the football.
There you go. See, you had it almost right. You'd make a great fortune teller, Lily. This is awesome. We'll be back next week. Let's make it 4 in a row. And we will then we'll have the Bears to talk about. So we're gonna have some fun. Thanks, Lily.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, I want to thank Lily Zhao for joining the show. Always great to talk to her. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. It's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. And right now, for a limited time, you can get their limited time flavor cookie dough chunk, which, you guys, the limited time flavors, there's one, I can't mention it, but one of my all-time favorites is coming back very soon. I don't want you to wait for it. Try the cookie dough chunk. Try, if you haven't tried, some of their base flavors. Coconut almond, love that one. Mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, love that one. Double chocolate, love that one. Double chocolate originally got me hooked on Built Bars. Salted caramel, there's something for everyone. And all of them are high protein, high fiber, low in net carbs, and low in sugar. So you're having something delicious that doesn't make you feel bad about eating it. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your first order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. We're back and better than ever. All eyes on the gridiron. Bet Online is your number one spot for college and pro football action this season with the new updated site and interface. Even more odds, props, and contests. Bet Online continues to be your number one source for everything football. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today for a free 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's promo code LOCKED ON to get that 50% deposit bonus. Football, basketball, right around the corner, by the way. NBA is back in like 2 weeks. Boxing, even Las Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for the 2021 season. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. And I want to thank again everyone who makes Locked On Packers your first listen. Make Peacock and Williamson your second listen. Check them out to get a broad look around the NFL on all things NFL, not just the Packers, but everything around the league. All right, we're going to be back tomorrow, crossover Thursday, and we'll get you set with your live stream on Friday. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to hit us up on the Locked On Packers fan hotline, you can do that, 920-341-3775 to stay Locked On Packers. Subscribe to The Leap.